Здравствуйте. So I'm very happy to be here today again. We met already yesterday, and I hope that this topic is not going to be as controversial as the previous one. I know that you wanted to talk more about terminology, but here we will focus on capacity building and development for translators in DGT. So, first of all, of course, if we speak about capacity building, we have to also think what is our core business? What are the core functions that we need to perform? And then we come to skills. What we do is of course, service the needs of the Commission in terms of translation. We have to do it in a timely manner, and we also have to provide high-quality translation. Although we actually also use very much now the fit-for-purpose approach. Depending on the type and audience of the document, we also have actually different quality approach. And for this mandate to actually provide this translation service, we use different resources, a mix of human, financial, and of course technological resources. Here, if we speak about human resources, then of course I should mention that we have permanent staff, which are called officials. We have the so-called AD officials and ASD officials, so in simple terms, translators and translation assistants, who are with us or supposed to be with us, until the end of their days, and some of them, in perhaps more established language departments, the early community members, for them, translators are even have been there for 30 years. So it's a long career. And so we have also temporary staff, and currently there is pressure to use more temporary staff. We have contract agents and temporary agents, and they are allowed to stay with us for maximum 6 years. Then I should mention freelance companies. I already mentioned that yesterday. So we have a freelance budget, which allows us to outsource translations using freelance companies or freelance individual translators. And I yesterday said that it's about 30% that we outsource. And depending on the internal resources, we can go up to 50% during the next 5 to 7 years. For the technology, just again to mention CAT tools and machine translation, which we consider very important in our combination of mix of resources. So, what are the core functions that we have in DGT? Of course, perhaps there is not much news to you, but just to go a bit deeper into those labels. So management, here we have we have head of a department who's managing the language department, and language departments are also subdivided into units, which are headed by heads of unit. So this is a normal language entity in DG translation for non-procedural languages. You remember that yesterday I spoke about procedural languages, English, French, and German. So they have more staff, they have more units because they have to produce more translations, but the non-procedural translation units translation entities are really department divided into 2 units. Of course, we have to coordinate workflow, both for internal and external translation. So basically make sure that the translation projects are coordinated and translation processes is followed. And sometimes in some language departments, actually this is done by translators. Translation per se, here I would like to mention lead translators again, which Francisca mentioned, that for big packages we have lead translators who take care of all the questions that may arise about the original, and they contact the requesters to get more information or clarifications. And perhaps here, under translation, I would also mention our local linguistic officers who work for the member states, who work for the Commission's representation in different member states. So their primary goal is really to localize Commission messages to the citizens, and also to take care of the outreach activities. Francesca mentioned terminology networks, actually liaising with ministry experts, also universities and public administrations. Quality management, this is normally done by quality officers. Each language department has a dedicated quality officer, or sometimes this role is also shared by different persons. And yesterday I mentioned that we have actually 4 translation directorates. So dividing all the 24 languages into directorates, and each directorate also has a quality manager who oversees all the quality assurance and control actions in the directorate. Perhaps I should also mention something which is different from the project, the way the project translation is set up. Namely, our translators are all called translators, irrespective of their experience, irrespective of their grade, I mean salary, basically. So they are all translators, and we also don't make a distinction between translators and revisers. So each translator should also be able to revise or review a colleague's document. Here, under quality management, I would like to also to mention freelance quality control, namely all freelance translations are evaluated for contractual purposes, because of course we need to make sure that we are able to pay for the translation done, and therefore we have to do an evaluation on the basis of 10% of the document. And if in the course of this evaluation a translator discovers that, well, there are problems, then the whole document might be revised. But again, there are sort of, quality guidelines depending on the type of document, how far you should go with quality control, because of course, yesterday I also mentioned that we are very much under pressure to be more efficient, more productive. So we have to reduce cost of translation, so it's not anymore the goal to really quality control each and every document 100%. So currently I think that grosso modo I would say that we quality control like 80% of internally produced documents and around 60% of outsourced documents. These are the sort of indicative percentages, but of course it depends as well on the documents. Terminology management, I won't go into that because Francesca talked about that. And a new function that we have recently introduced, language technology coordination and support. We introduced this function actually last year because we saw that it's very important for translators to be able to use all the tools that are put at their disposal, CAT tools and also machine translation. Therefore, we decided that it's not enough that Digita actually has an IT unit. So there is IT help desk, but it's not enough because there should be people in the language departments who on a regular basis could help out translators with tips and tricks and teach them, things that they don't know. And also, in a way, make sure that the skill set are there. So we introduced, there is one language technology coordinator per department, per language department. I don't mention additional tasks. So basically all those functions, except for management, can be done by translators. And you see there are quite a lot of functions, but there are also other additional functions which are not directly related to translation, because we have to remember that translators are those who are permanent translators. They are recruited as officials, and they can also be mobile. They can move to another DG, which means that they have to also have communication skills, and for that reason, there are also other tasks that they perform in DGT. In terms of communication, helping the EPSO, which is the European selection, what is it called? European Personal Selection Office, yes. So they are helping out EPSO people to actually mark translation tests. They are sitting on selection boards and helping other functions. So I didn't put them here on the screen. Okay. Yesterday, you heard quite a bit about the different competence models. And here I would also like to make a reference to the ISO translation standard, which also speaks about translator competencies. And you heard about the European Master in Translation. So there could be also organization-specific standards, and I would like to say that, of course, DGT has been inspired by all those different models, and has come up with their own sort of approach to a translator profile. So I'll just quickly show you the ISO. So it's very sort of similar to that of the EMT translator competence model and the what's the PACTI? Yes. So it's really very similar, and the EMT, just again for as a reminder. And here, yes, I would like to now focus on DGT translator profile. As I said, we have been drawing on the different models, and also looked at our own needs. And we have actually defined the translator profile in terms of specific skills that they need, and also generic skills. So if we look at the specific skills, I would like to perhaps highlight that what we consider very, very important is thematic or domain-specific knowledge. Because we see more and more, especially with also machine translation, that it's very, very important to be specialized, at least to some degree. Here, of course, it's quite difficult for DG translators, because, as you know, we are the first in the chain of production for ordinary legislative procedure documents, which means that we have to do all the terminology work, all the terminology research. And practically, it's very difficult to ask translators to specialize. But of course, we try to do that as much as possible. For instance, finances, very technical areas where it just doesn't make sense to ask just any translator to take up a very complex technical text. So we try to do that. And more we see that this is important. It was also mentioned in the ISO standard, domain-specific knowledge. So I think that this is something that we attach very much importance to. Then I would like to mention language technologies, because this is why we introduced this new function, language technology coordination. So we consider this skill also very, very important. So that all translators are able to use CAT tools and also machine translation. I have to say that, as I said, some translators have been working for DGT for 20, 30 years. And you can imagine, if you work in one environment and you started, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, the way translation was done was very, very different. And sometimes we run into challenges in trying to ask some very experienced translators to change their working methods. So I believe that there are actually in DGT a few translators who don't actually use CAT tools. Francesca can probably also confirm that. But this is not a standard, and all the new languages, of course, when they joined, The first wave in 2004, they already were very much used to CAT tools. And just a little anecdote, I think that in those times long ago, actually dictaphones were used. You know, we had, translator was just dictating and there was a secretary who was sort of taking down the translation. But now I think this skill is very useful because it's, the speech recognition tools. So I think that some of our translators are also using speech recognition. So there are a few more here that I have mentioned. Now we come to the generic skills. So we call them sort of soft skills. And here I would like to perhaps highlight collaborative working and cooperation, which is very important because, of course, translation in Digiti is teamwork. And very often now we have translators have to work on one document. You know, there's an urgent request coming in, perhaps even only 20 pages, but we can't afford to have just one translator doing it because the deadline is so short. We have to split up the document, and therefore it's absolutely paramount importance that they are able to work together and share information. And again, related to technologies, we consider openness and flexibility for new tools and technologies very, very important. So all the rest is pretty self-evident. So, but I just wanted to highlight those two soft skills. So, if you think about yesterday, the competence models and now what we require our translators to do and what skills that we require them to have, then you see that we are very demanding. And I wonder about those graduates, whether we are frightening them off. But it's in a way it's paradoxical. We are very demanding, but you know that when we recruit translators via the normal channel, which is via the EPSO competition, public EPSO competition, then we don't really require any experience. So this is very strange. It's paradoxical. What we require is a university degree, and it doesn't need to be in translation. It could be in any area. And actually, now we even want to get more subject area specialists, for instance, lawyers or economists, because it's good to have this kind of knowledge. We have lots of linguists, and we believe that this linguistic competence can be actually acquired also on the job. So this is paradoxical. We don't need, we don't require experience, but I have to say that the EPSO competition is also very demanding. There are very, very difficult tests. They are called computer-based tests. It's abstract reasoning, verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, assessment center, and then, of course, translation skills, translation and revision skills. So it's really very demanding, and sometimes we wonder whether we get those really good translators because sometimes they fail the first stage, those different abstract reasoning and CBT tests. So it's a bit of the way the system is built up. But just to remind you that what I said already, that we are actually recruiting administrators, which means that they can work in any DG, also in political DG. So we have to apply the same requirements as for other applicants. So this is why we run those tests. Okay. Now, yes, so we spoke about the functions, skills, and now what are the opportunities? Here again, just before going to this to the learning and development, it's clear that the translator profile is evolving because of rapid technological changes, especially in terms of artificial intelligence, neural-machine translation, and the profile is not really static and set in stone. Actually, a few weeks ago, in the senior management, among the senior management team, we were discussing whether we should introduce a new job title, computational linguist, and also data manager, and whether they should be in the language departments or whether they should be part of the IT unit. So this is something that we will be very much looking into and discussing, because more and more we also want translators to be able to give good feedback to machine translation output, in a way to train the machines. And currently, of course, we have e-translation, neural-machine translation for all language pairs, but our developers, of course, don't cover all the languages. So it would be useful to have this language-specific knowledge as well, in order to perhaps even come up with better trained engines, machine translation engines. Okay, now we come to the learning and development priorities of DGT. So we regard ourselves as a learning organization, and of course, all of us we are tried to sort of learn through the whole life cycle, and this is a principle that we have very much encouraged our translators and other staff to sort of embrace. So these are the current learning and development priorities that apply in DGT. And a few years ago, perhaps I would say like 5 years ago, what would have been on top? What would be your guess? If you look at the list, we have right now digital proficiency, thematic training on the third place. So what is your guess? What was the first, well, say 5 years ago? No, you can't guess it. No. It was language learning. You can't believe it. You can't believe it. It is something that our Director General is always, quoting. I mean, how come, they come to DGT with 3 languages at least, some of them many more languages, and they still want to learn other languages. It's in a way, of course, it's understandable, but in terms of the organization, we need to focus much more on digital proficiency. I just keep mentioning that. Last year, we actually ran a digital skills survey among our translators. So all the translators had to take this survey because we wanted to find out what is their skill level in terms of the use of CAT tools and also machine translation. The results were actually very good. And we want to sort of, repeat this analysis perhaps in a year or two, because we really want to drive it home to translators that this is something absolutely essential. I think that this is not a problem for newcomers who join us, because they are already very, IT savvy, but it concerns more translators who have been, working for us for a number of years. And again, thematic training in different areas. I think it's very important also to mention knowledge sharing and communities of practice. I mentioned those different functions, and we really encourage people to come together from different language departments and discuss issues related to quality management, freelance translation evaluations, validations, terminology work, and other areas, because one of the big challenges for us is actually harmonization of working methods. You can imagine that we have so many 24 language departments, and each of them, in a way, has been allowed to develop their own ways of approach, but with the use of tools, of course, we have to standardize more and more, and because we are also in the process of automating some of the processes, for instance, outsourcing, then you can't do that if people actually use different working methods. So this is a big challenge, and therefore we very much encourage, knowledge sharing and communities of practice to encourage that. Okay. And just to mention some other things, cross-cutting events between different departments, also different horizontal units, and explorative events on new technologies. We have a Kate lab where actually translators can test different tools. So for instance, our translators tested MemoQ in that Kate lab, MemoQ on the cloud, and also some quality assessment tools. The idea is not really to test them in order to buy those tools. The idea is to get an understanding how the industry is developing, what functionalities are there, and also sort of enrich our own understanding of working methods. So this is something that we very much encourage. And I mentioned to you that we are running currently a new tender, a public tender for the new CAT tool. And actually, our Kate Lab testers very much contributed to establishing the technical specifications, the tender specifications, because we wanted, of course, the translator needs to be taken as the basis. And just, an overview of what is on offer on DGT. So, training and learning and development activities are provided actually on 3 levels. Centrally in DGT, then at corporate level in the Commission, and also at department level. So if I just scroll on, here is an initiative, Visiting Translator Scheme, which is run at DGT central level, and it means that we send our translators for a short visit to their own member state or to another member state, either to a university or a ministry or even a tech company, again to get knowledge and share knowledge. So this is quite popular, and now we want to encourage people to also to go to various private translation companies or software companies, again to get some know-how and to see how other translators in the private sector are working. I would also like to mention traineeship, because all the European institutions are running actually Blue Book traineeships, which last for 5 months. And this is actually, trainees are a very good source for future translators. Many of those who have been trainees for the Commission and for the Council or Parliament end up as our staff. So this is very useful for both parties. And this is just to show you our intranet, where we have translation tools and training courses and materials on translation tools. Here you see the CAT tool skills catalog. So here we list all the skills that are required in order to really use CAT tools. And our master trainers are giving specific training. They have produced training materials, training modules. So this is completely sort of DGT-run exercise and not done by the corporate level. Okay, language-specific training very quickly. As I said, language departments can organize their own training. And here I would like to mention the Language and Terminology Network conferences that each language department actually organizes on a yearly basis. So they organize a conference inviting different stakeholders from the ministries, experts who are contributing with terminology, also freelance companies, to share information and to discuss how to improve terminology. I think that it's very important for you also to understand that EU translators, of course, we have the obligation to translate law, but we have to rely on national experts because we don't have all those domain experts among translators. Lots of our people are linguists, and therefore we need to reach out to experts in the ministries, in the member states. Okay, and finally, just to mention interinstitutional style guides, I think that Francesca mentioned them yesterday. This is a link, an internet link, where you can find those guidelines in all the 24 languages. So I think it would be very useful for you to check what kind of issues are actually governed, controlled, and also perhaps use some of those materials. And just again a screenshot of TGT Learning and Development newsletter. It's called Sophia, and here you just have a screenshot of various courses that are on offer. And this is now EU Learn. This is the corporate system. We have the learning and development activities are divided into three. It's EU policies, skills and knowledge, and languages. And just I will show you the screenshot. So here you have all the different domain-specific courses that are available in policy areas. And each translator, of course, can take them. And skills and knowledge, and languages. Overall, I would say that our translators and translation assistants spend about 10 days on learning and development activities per year. Of course, if they learn a language, then it's more, but on an average, it's 10 days per year, which is quite a lot. It is more than the Commission average. And дякую.